Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745. You're going to continue with my playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8 and Third Reich events installed. We'll get with this here. No, we're not going to buy crude. Not even from you, Romania. Though, let's take a quick look. Pause it. Okay. We need to be producing more supplies. We currently are. And since we just got that little request from Romania, and we want to improve our relations with Romania, we'll see if they just sell us one. Oh, good. That's quite nice. Yes, we know you're not going to truly align with us. Or some nations will try to align with your faction. No, I don't want to buy fuel. Light anti-aircraft armament, that would be cruisers here. Okay, so we've got that done. What's the... oh no, that was the only one. Now, I shifted a slight number of leadership over to diplomats because I'm back to influencing Japan again. No. I want to get them in. Get the tripartite pact bonus. As the days march by. Radar advance, that's great. Key development there. We'll go with radar for capital ships. Rocket artillery and ammunition is advanced. Switch over to that. Let's see how China's doing. Well, how Japan's doing in China. Well, they've gotten all the way down. What is it, Yunnan, or how do you pronounce the island down here? Alright, that one starts with an A. We'll continue pursuing Blitzkrieg. Attack movement plus 15%. Blitz 6%. Both are always welcome. But attack movement is something I do sort of look forward to having speed in my attacks. Building up our carrier tech pretty well. I'm not yet ready to devote the ICs to building it and its aircraft. Okay, armor unit combined arms. We'll let that go. The USA. No. How's Japan's resources doing at the moment? Deficit on oil. Voodoo. Five. No. Offer trade agreement. Buy a bit of energy from them. Argentina, our good friends down there. No, not that much. How is Argentina looking diplomatically? Okay, now that value is so high compared to what we need, I think, primarily because of where it's located. But they do seem to be very close with us otherwise. No, I'm not going to influence them at the moment. I'll just let that be. I have higher priorities, like Iran. Okay, well, mentioning some of those higher priorities. Saudi Arabian envoy. Another event contributed by George, 1941. Adolf Hitler meets the Ober Salzburg with Khalid al-Hund, special envoy of the King of Saudi Arabia, Ibn Abd al-Aziz. I got that reasonably right. In this meeting, Hitler noted that one of the three reasons why Germany had warm sympathy with the Arabs was because we were jointly fighting the Jews. This led him to discuss Palestine and conditions there, and then stated that he himself would not rest until the last Jew had left Germany, Khalid al-Hund observed that the Prophet Muhammad had acted the same way he had driven the Jews out of Arabia. Okay, I've got these quotes. I hope they're correct. The meaning, or at least English versions of them. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia very much embraced Wahhabi version of Islam. My understanding is it's a rather fundamentalist version of Islam compared to, I don't know, Sufi Islam. And no, I don't know the details of the doctrinal differences. The big one that I sort of know is between Shia and Sunni, and if I have it right, Shia believes in sort of like saints, or yeah, I guess something like saints that of post Muhammad, if you will, where the Sunnis sort of reject that idea. I think that's about the only real doctrinal difference with that. Okay, well, our meeting with him improves relations with Saudi Arabia and Iraq, which the two royal families were fairly close. So yeah, we'll go with that. Okay, Dr. Hans Posey. Dr. Posey was a special representative of Hitler in Sonderauftrag, Linz. Build up a collection of art for the Reich. Hitler, well, he was an art student, so he was very much involved in art and had lots of opinions on it. It wasn't just something that was sort of casual to him. Not that he was a good artist. I know some people sort of said that. No, the buildings were the right scale to the rest of the backgrounds. He didn't draw people well or hardly at all, or paint people, and it was just okay basic stuff that wouldn't sell anywhere unless he was famous. Nobody would be, well, that's cute, let me put it up in my house. No, it was nothing like that. But he was very much into art, and very much wanted to use art for political purposes, both in the sense of conveying a political message within the art, and to try to show German greatness by promoting great German or artists of the past, as well as just great art in general, and that Germany possesses it. And they wanted their main museum to be in Linz, which it's there. I'm trying to show you there, Linz. And he wanted to set that up as the capital of German art. So, yep, just setting that up. That was part of the setup to something that's going to show up and be important later on. Ambassador von Papen, former Vice Chancellor, as you know, under Hitler. He was ambassador to Austria during the Anschluss period and working towards that. And now we are sending him off to Turkey to improve our relations with Turkey, and supposedly he was rather effective there. Nice picture of that German embassy, or no, that's not the embassy, that's his residence, I believe. Not as distinct from the embassy, as von Papen's residence, I believe. Germany New magazine was published in Germany in English and language, and it was distributed in the United States and Britain, so that those nations will get events that make them like Germany a little bit better, propagandize the population, how great Germany's doing. And particularly in Britain, it was working. There was a large sense, not, I would say, a liking of Nazis, but that Nazis have got things back into order and working all right, kind of thing. That sort of opinion, I would say, was common within the British population. Not that they liked Nazis, not that they thought everything they were doing was good. It was just like, hey, well, there was chaos in Germany. Now there's no longer chaos. Things are running well and efficiently. That sort of thing. That was sort of British opinion, and I don't think that was contradicted too much by British tourists going through. They didn't see the problems. I think people were not encouraged to talk about the problems to foreigners, and I think foreigners were largely, left to just be, tourists and not to try to antagonize them. So that propaganda was working, in my opinion. Small warship radar has advanced. That, I believe, is here. How is it? Radar? Your radar advance. Okay. It's still, well, I guess. Oh, it's grayed out. Okay. Okay, well, we're now in 1939, and we want to do that, I think. Help defend against, and do air attacks, both of those. Okay, fuel now. Here's Waffen Amt. That's basically the Army arms headquarters, basically. Issued a contract for development of, let me see, machine carbine, or machine carbine, MKB for short, chambered in the new 7.92 by 33 Kurtz cartridge. This is the standard 7.92 German military cartridge of the period. It's where the American 30 caliber, 30-06, was 7.62 millimeters, so it's just 0.3 of a millimeter difference, the German being bigger. The Germans recognized that that cartridge was probably, was overpowered for most applications, including rifles. Now you can look at something like the, particularly like the Italian 6.5 millimeter was underpowered for a rifle. The Japanese also used a 6.5, but it was a more powerful chambering, meaning the amount of powder behind it. It's not so much the diameter of the bullet, it's how much powder behind it determines a lot of this. This caliber is fine for a machine gun, but it determined that it's probably a bit big. This is the beginning of the assault gun revolution, the Sturmgewehr, as we're continuing to call it to this day. The classic Sturmgewehr round, if you will, followed by this cartridge basically ended widespread usage at the end of World War II. Yugoslavia was known to use they captured enough guns and known to manufacture the ammo, and the modern day uses of it is in Iraq. I don't know if it's still heavily used in Iraq, but it was heavily used in Iraq because they overran, one of the rebel groups overran one armory that had a bunch of Sturmgewehrs in it and a large supply of ammunition for it. I've even seen photos of a 1940 Sturmgewehr hooked up to a remotely operating system with a camera stuck on it so that the guy could use it with a joystick from behind, more protection as a video game shooting gun using this cartridge. But I think the use either has or will peter out very quickly because no one's continued to make the ammunition in any significant volumes, and don't know how much ammunition they were able to capture. Sort of surprising to me because I have never seen any photos of Syrian troops from like the 50s using the Sturmgewehrs. Seen them using a bit later AKs, but they must have picked them up somewhere and probably used them or just warehoused them. I don't know. But that's just sort of the history of the modern history of the cartridge and its use. So this is the chance here. New weapon was intended as a replacement for the submachine gun, bolt-action rifles, and partly light machine guns for troops, and was intended to have an effective range of 600 meters or so. So this is, we have the cartridge at this time in 1939 already basically finalized, and this is now putting out a requirement for a gun to shoot the cartridge to be developed. So we can spend some supplies and get some gain on assault rifles, which is where is it? It's right here. Assault rifles, will get some gain on that if we wish to, and I do. Hello, Romania. No, we don't want to buy fuel from you. And Italy. We don't need to buy crude oil from them. Okay, I'm gonna go click over, open up my browser here. So I want to read something. This is coming up, but I'm not totally prepared for it. Okay, sorry about the slewing around while I'm going over to the other thing, and I'll go back to it. Here. The National Socialist Government forced the Jewish family of Simson to flee the country in 1936. Let's see, it's open. I know you're not seeing this, it's fine. Just pulling up a message I got. I was contacted by a member of the Simson family. After playing TRE, which I was very pleasantly surprised. They did flee, and he related a bit of a story, and I think I'll relate it to you here about this. The Simson Company was, my understanding, was the smallest of the large armaments manufacturers in Germany. And after World War I, it was the only company allowed by the Treaty of Versailles to continue to make arms for the Reich. I don't know that that shut down all other arms manufacturers that were like, I don't think it did for a civil use, you know, bolt-action hunting rifles, double-barreled shotguns, those type of things, to my understanding, were continued to be permitted, but they were the only ones that were allowed to continue for military production in Germany. After World War I, and we can talk about this in more detail, there became this very this sort of myth that I think is entirely false, entirely malicious, and we can go into it, but the idea of war profiteering as a law, and there were lawsuits and things like that in the US, I know, based on this, but as in a sort of evil thing that came out. I don't buy it. I'll go into more of it later on. But just one example was from the 1920s or 30s, I think more 1930s, the Depression era. If you know the sort of comic book and then the stage play and some movies of Little Orphan Annie. Who's the rich
father that adopts, daddy war bucks. The rich guys, the industrialists, were war profiteers, daddy war bucks as being evil. Well, okay. We can go more into my diatribe on that. But one story that passed down through the family was that after World War I, the Reich requested the Simson Company to supply twice as many guns as permitted under the Versailles Treaty. Now this I totally believe because I've read other reports about the Reichswehr setting up secret armories around Germany to supply, this is mostly in the 20s, to supply the various Freikorps and veterans associations with weapons in case, maybe in case of Germany being invaded, they would be called up, or I think more likely internal revolution happening, and they were more worried about a socialist leftist revolution like the Spartacus revolt in Berlin. So and so it had the company, and this is, I'm reading from his post here, it had the company supply 2 guns but invoice for only 1 gun at twice the price. Fritz Schackel, Nazi Gauleiter of Thuringia, attempted to seize the company because it had overcharged the Reichswehr. This gets back to the war profiting sort of charge. The army told him not to publicize this, so he just jailed the family members until they relinquished control of the company. And he believes that, and I don't know that he would be wrong, but was the first Jewish-owned company to be seized by the Nazis. I don't have date. Sorry, I was trying to read this thing on the other side. Sure, look crazy. Sorry about that. No him. And I do know that very much that they obviously eventually seized all Jewish-owned businesses, unless the Jews had already sold up and left the country by this time. But so this is how early on they were still having to justify seizing of a company, not because they were Jewish, but because they had defrauded the German government or profiteered the German government. Since they're the sole source of supply, we're going to double the price of firearms and that type of thing. So whether also artillery or other things, but I know they were mainly or heavily a firearms manufacturer. They if you're a gun collector and ever come across a Luger with 2-year dates on it, they're called double dates. They are guns worked over or reconditioned by the Simson Company. My understanding is that the idea was to send all of the German Army's Lugers back through the Simson Company to be reconditioned, all World War I Lugers, to be reconditioned by Simson. So they should, if they remained in Germany, to some degree they should have a double date on them. And those World War I guns, if brought back, were probably brought back during World War II, after World War II. So I just feel rather honored that he communicated with me and thought that I had basically got it right, and I may update the text a bit like this, a bit about this. But so the Simson Company in Schul here was one of the companies that became part of the Gustloff Works, named after the Swiss-German Nazi who Frankenfurter shot, of course, and also named the ship and other things after him. But this was a basically a government-owned firm, and became much more than just what had been Simson. It expanded into many other areas as a big armaments company. So that's just sort of the story. Very interesting to hear what the family knows about it. So the Gustloff Works, and we'll gain a little improvements to our industry. I'm glad that TRE is having such a good impact in telling stories of the people in the times, and that it's getting out there. I estimate there's been at least 10,000 different people. I've had many more downloads, but I know a lot of them are just you guys, new version coming up. So the first 300 or 500 downloads are just the sort of core players that are quickly downloading it when a new version comes out. But looking at the different versions and how many that come out and over time, I figure there's probably about at least 10,000 people who've downloaded and played it. So I'm rather pleased by that. Okay, Marine Hitlerjugend. Somewhat like the SA Marine or Marine SA. I've seen it in German done both ways. This was a training program, sort of a subset of the Hitler Youth. It obviously did all the standard Nazi indoctrination elements, very much so, but also sailing. These are Hitler Youth guys going out to a visit or whatever to a warship, which of course they would get some basic training on. Other books, and obviously they sometimes wore sort of Hitler Youth style caps, but they also wore the Navy style caps with their more naval uniforms as well. So we can keep training. Again, it's going to cost us a bunch of supplies, 2,500. If you're not interested in doing the Navy, stay away from this. You'll get no other benefit out of this, but if you want to, it's part of the overall training elements. And since all the pictures I saw were of sailing and ships, none seemed to have anything to do with the submarines. I didn't give any submarine crew improvement. So we're going to do that because I do have a plan for working with the German Navy. Small ships sonar. Okay, very useful. Some detection, surface detection. We'll go have duff. This spots radios. This spots sound. I know many of you know that. I really like when you guys post. I'm quite surprised often that how well a lot of you guys already know all this stuff and are still interested in what I have to say about it. But just to try to get the knowledge base of my audience, because I don't picture you as individuals, but who I'm talking to. How much do I need to explain? You know what a bullet is? Of course you do, but at some point. Okay, we got some here. Move a bit more into supplies, especially because we're selling a lot of them. Pay for all of this. Cruiser warfare has advanced. That will be down here. Okay, so we got both 1941, which we will have to do a bit more later to get that. Commerce defense we're also interested in. Radar training. Yeah, that sounds good. See, let me just quickly. Ship crew training. See, we already have a bonus there for the Hitler Youth and other. Not for radar training, because I look at something like the radar training is they wouldn't let the Hitler Youth guys get anywhere near it because it still would be in 39 such a secret program that they'd cover it with a cloth or something if they let them up on the bridge or anywhere near them operating. Okay, I think we'll go with the fourth landing craft. large enough for our Baltic and North Sea operations. I'm hoping range 1,800 kilometers. Okay, really don't know how far up they'll get me, but that's good. So what I'm doing here with these, just to see, like those are all motor torpedo boats, and so are those. These are split 50-50 between the torpedo boats, motor torpedo boats. And here is just obviously one with two others to, I'm thinking of going two more of that, to give it a little more depth. We're going to be running supply lines up and through here and into places like here eventually. I want to be able to sink submarines here, as well as if there's any Soviet subs, sink them there. And I'm planning on using using a lot of bombers of various types to do a lot of the heavy hitting as well. And so my hope is, and I've seen it happen quite often, is to have a combined air and sea attacks on British shipping as they are operating in this area. And so even though there'll be just some motor torpedo boats going after like a few British light cruisers or whatever, which might seem to just simply decimate them, often the air power is combining with them and hitting them pretty hard. It seems to work fairly well with relatively little cost and loss, even if I totally lose a stack of light forces like that. And I'm not, I don't cry over it where, I don't really literally cry over it, but I do bemoan direct fire. Fine arms, okay. Bemoan the loss of a crew or two, or of a full cruiser or two. That would be painful. Okay, well, let's I want to research blitzkrieg attack movement rapidly. I want to hit the enemy with violence and speed. That includes from when I start moving to hitting them, attacking them. I think I have some as well. First pair. Give them up. Motorcycles are transportable. Okay, no, Sussman. I think I want Sussman. Kesselring's great, but he doesn't have the commando trait. It's not gonna let me scroll. No. Okay. Well.
we go, Sussman. He has the commando trait. So I'm giving him the... while keeping student as... For some reason my mouse wheel is no longer scrolling here. Okay, well that isn't terribly fun. Okay, well I'm going to end this session now. This is a some sort of hardware software. Probably need to restart the game. Click off. Click back on. Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. No, I want to keep playing. Figure out what we're going to produce next year. So yeah, Sussman I like to do is my core commander. We've got lots of fighters, lots of some good divisions there. Okay, let's build sort of a classic early in that we don't have armored mechanized infantry. Let's do medium artillery. Let's do heavy AA, engineers. And go full on trucks. Now that's filling up for now, but I will find a divisional headquarters or something. Hopefully we'll get, let's just start production. I'm going to do that. Okay, superior firepower. Technology. Superior firepower, June 15th. Now this will get happening much faster once 1940 hits. And we're still about almost 6 months away from that. So hopefully by the time I need to have that, I'll have a divisional. That's pushing it. Oh well. So I do want all those various unit types in there. Okay, that was fairly big, but not terribly big. Costly, I should say, not terribly costly. And do a few more of the semi-motorized types that I like to build as well. Divisional headquarters. There we go, most all of the various elements. And we'll push Tirpitz down to the bottom of the production queue. Those light forces help make the building of destroyers cheaper, obviously. Let's take a quick look here. I'm also going to put a destroyer in another one entity.
you just want. They're fairly cheap. Or a flotilla of destroyers. I don't think they'll be in production immediately, but I wanted to get them there and going. No fuel, no fuel. Okay. Bank for International Settlement. 5% ICs. Absolutely. Leadership 5%. Absolutely. And we're going to go for the biggest one because we can afford it, and I want an additional 4% ICs, an additional 3% in leadership compared to the others. That is an incredibly useful decision. Always take the max if you can afford it. What's that? Always do that. No, I don't care about Cuba. No. Okay, German-Romanian Trade Agreement. July 20th, 1939, representatives of the German Reich and Romania signed the Bucharest Trade Agreement on cooperation in agriculture. Okay, what is our decision? We can sign it, we gain money, supplies, which is sort of presumed to be the agricultural improvements. Relations with Romania, I don't see a downside on that. They also get their event or no need. Basically, if you don't want to have good relations with Romania, you say no, we want to do that. Another event provided by George 1941. He digs these things up. It's really nice of him to do that. I think partially just, you know, he's a history teacher and looking around, but he has a Central European perspective, being from the Czech Republic, which is different than, you know, English-speaking American who, you know, looks at it from my viewpoint. Okay, Nationalist Socialist books for Iran. I thought this was another very interesting thing. Germany provided Iran with a German scientific library. The library contained over 7,500 books selected to convince, and this is supposedly in quotes from what I got, to convince the Iranian readers of the kinship between National Socialist Reich and the Aryan culture of Iran. So when we say scientific books, they're not necessarily like chemistry books entirely in that sense, or in engineering books. I'm sure they're likely some of them. Obviously it's in German. This is a German library. It's not one in Farsi. So I don't know how widely it was read, because I don't know how widely the, you know, reading and writing in German was known in Iran, but various pro-Nazi publications, lectures, speeches, ceremonies, parallels were drawn between the Shah of Iran and Hitler, praise for the charisma and virtue of the Führer principle, the leader principle, if you will, the Führer principle. So we can send the books, cost us some supplies, lose a little bit of money, and help situation or relations with Iran, or not do so. We're going to choose to do so because this is enormous money. Cool. And give them money for rare materials, Bulgaria. Yes, we will do that because we're almost not having any cushion there. We'll get Bulgaria into more research. Okay, so we can do that by bit. As some pointed out, my technique of picking what doctrines is not necessarily very scientific. It's more gut instinct. Finland. Yes. Okay. Build the Istanbul to Tehran Railroad. Period. Photos from Period magazine. Virgin Turkey. Train engine. And a period map covering some of the railroads. Not saying the map is 100% complete, but I do believe it is accurate for the railroads that are shown. Oil shipments via the sea links are very vulnerable to blockade by the British and French. So we have the possibility of building a railroad. Now, I have not gone through the complicated, and it would be highly complicated programming to try to figure out how to do, and I think it can be done, to simulate oil transfers via railway and not go through the sea. So you won't get that benefit if you do this event. What you will get is an event that you spend a lot of money, a lot of supplies, resources on, get a little bit of improvement, and once the project is finished, you'll get a significant infrastructure gain here. So that, unfortunately it's all black at the moment, we don't see what condition are, but these are very poor infrastructure. So if roughly along the rail track there, the red is what wasn't built. The Iranian railroad goes up to there already, and the Turkish railroad goes here. This built during goes in and out of Syria. This other railroad here goes to there and then stops. And there's the person who the railroad magazine of the 1939 talked about a bus ride down here to the Iraqi railroad, and then to Baghdad now to Basra. So there are no rail links through this part of the world. There is only at this time, at best, a very tenuous roadway through here. So basically there's no railway through here, and going through these mountains I figure would be extremely costly, and money, I think you would have to bribe lots of people. Lots of money spent in Turkey I think would just end up not doing much. Some of it would be needed, but I know corruptions in this part of the world. I think people would see this as a cash cow. Obviously a lot of the supplies and effort is coming, because Turkey and Persia or Iran aren't going to be the ones funding the supplies. You're going to be sending them down there via railroad, and huge metal hit. Probably a little bigger, and that was before metal was such an issue. The supplies, I'm still very much thinking it should be in that kind of range, because it's very mountainous. This is, look at the terrain setting here. It's going through these mountains, both in Turkey and Iran. I think this is right where the Iran railroad stops. But if you pick this and this area doesn't turn into a major war until the project is finished, you will get the improved rail infrastructure. I am not going to do it because I do not have the supplies that I want to put onto this. I almost said waste. I don't know that it's a waste. You would get some of the manpower back when it's done, and some of the officers back when it's done, but it's a major costly project that hasn't been done. Pretty sure it still hasn't been done. I don't think there is a railway through here. I know back in the 70s, late 70s, there still wasn't. So pretty sure no one's built a railway through here. But there's your opportunity to do so. If you control Turkey, and that's also the other thing for flowing of supplies. You have to conquer, not puppet, but conquer Turkey, and then conquer Iran to have German supplies flow through here. Otherwise, they don't flow. You'd get movement bonus for strategic redeployment or whatever, but that's it. So it's more of a very interesting idea that I had, and definitely would. It would be considerably more worth it if we could, without having a contiguous German territory, run oil up through here and sort of create another Ploetsky kind of effect, so long as the supply chain is in Axis hands. And it's not that difficult to code, but I haven't. Just takes time, a little bit of thought and time, and just haven't done it. But it'd be a sort of another second Ploetsky, as long as you get everything controlled in the Axis. So we're not going to do it. Okay, the jerry can. I know a few people have commented about sometimes I'm going a bit more detail into some of the magazines and some of the more minor things, and yeah, I know, but this is something very important, something that you've heard me talk about if you watched the previous series. But this was a major revolution in several ways. I've often heard them, and I think they were called flimsies at the time. That was the British fuel can thing. It was a much square, sort of taller than it was wide for sure, but it was a much squarer box looking down on the top. You see the standard can is what they use as a condensing can for the Vickers machine gun. Obviously they're using water at the time and not fuel. But it leaked, and it leaked in the sense, not necessarily always as in fuel running out of it, but as in fumes evaporating out of it. So it leaked. It was very poorly made. It was sort of made to be, because they did use a similar type of thing in Asia to sell fuel. And the idea is that when you come and bought your first gallon or whatever the size was, smallish, that you'd buy that, and then you could bring it back to, refill. The refilling part didn't work. Everybody just kept them and bought new because they wanted to use them for other sources carrying water or whatever it was in Asia. But the flimsies, that was sort of the standard fuel can for the era. This was a revolution. In some of my research I found on this, there was a German and American, two guys, that went for some major cross-country drive through like Turkey, Iran, ending up somewhere in India. Basically, and they may be planning on continuing on. Basically, once they got somewhere in India, the guy was the German was a reserve German officer. Well, he got, I think, like 4 of these fuel cans for the drive to use. This is fuel cans. The Germans came and picked them up and flew him and either destroyed or carried back 3 of the fuel cans, because they did not want this out. They did not want anybody getting their hands on them. The American did get to keep, somehow managed to keep one of them, because he realized what he was looking at, and took it back to the United States and showed the U.S. War Department this great fuel can, and they just, oh, cool, walked away and didn't do anything about it. They didn't understand it. They did not understand what it was. And that's sort of par for the course for the American War Department at this time period. So this was a revolutionary, well-built can. It was designed to be carried either by one person on the single handle, or 2 people to share the load out on the handles on the outside. It had a pour spout built into it that you could use as part of it. It had a fairly wide mouth for refueling, as you can see them doing here. The qualities and conditions of the can is maybe half the aspect, maybe not, but it's a good portion of the aspect. It was very, very effective for carrying and hauling fuel. So much so, obviously, now it's called the jerry can, and it's still basically, whether in metal or in plastic, more or less state of the art, and some of the original jerry cans are better than modern copies of the stuff. The other part of it was, at least half, if not more, was the system. What they would do is, in yards sort of like you're seeing here, is fill them up with fuel, load them on regular trucks, The regular trucks would start driving down the road behind the advancing armored troops. They would get to a location, and then the tank crews would swarm the trucks. Everybody grabbing cans of fuel, and everybody going to their tanks. Generally, if they're Panzer IIIs and later, that's 5 men per tank. So they would immediately swarm the truck, empty the truck would immediately turn around and drive back up the line of advance and find a previous fuel dump, and the truck crew of normally at least 2 or 3 or maybe more, and maybe try to draft in a few other people they could find hanging about, reloaded the empty cans onto the truck and drove back to the fuel depot. And then people would obviously the fuel depot would pull off all the empty cans and reload the cans onto the regular truck. The other systems in use, like in France and other places, were highly sophisticated systems that they had these fuel trucks that normally had just one pour spout, whether it was hand cranked or whether it was a refueling situation, or whether it was a mechanical pumped, I think, or engine pumped. I think most of them were engine pumped, so they would pump fast. But they would load up, they would refuel one tank at a time instead of 10 or 20 tanks at a time. And so one fuel truck would load one tank, maybe 2, one on each side. That would be max. And so it was a much slower process to refuel the tanks. It required specialty fuel trucks, which there weren't necessarily lots of them. The German system was, as I talked about, the empty trucks, the trucks going back and picking up empty cans. Well, you can just, if you will, dragoon from various sources more and more just regular trucks. Say, hey, soldiers, have enough food for right now. You guys that were hauling fuel or food 2 hours ago, you're now hauling fuel. And after that load, they can go back and haul more food, where the limited number of specialty fuel trucks is only going to haul fuel, or maybe you can convert it over to water, but that sort of gets bad for the water and tanks, mixing it up, because tanks are sort of designed to do what they're going to do, and you don't necessarily want to contaminate the water with fuel, or vice versa. Bad things happen. So these specialty trucks were really good, but really slow in the overall performance. And I can go into cases where I think it was a regiment of armor that was being moved during the Battle of France, during the invasion. The trucks for the regiment, since they moved pretty quickly, drove to their location of where the rendezvous was, and they would get there. The tanks, because French tanks particularly were slow and had small fuel tanks, they knew if they tried to drive them there, it would take them a lot longer to get there, like 3 or 4 times as long. So they loaded them on trains, the tanks, and had the train, to meet up at the train station. Well, what happened was the train didn't get to the train station. Either it was couldn't get there because of rail damage, or just it took a wrong turn. I'm not exactly sure which, and I read the thing, and it's reported as fact that it couldn't get there. So they got to a nearish by train station, unloaded, drove the tanks off the train, and then started to drive to the rendezvous point. Well, the French particularly had small fuel tanks in their tanks. It's sort of redundant, but small fuel tanks in their tanks. And they couldn't get to the next train station that they needed to go to because they hadn't loaded any of the fuel trucks on the train. I mean, this is just, obviously one stupid case and something you could say, oh, well, I'm going to play as France and I'm going to do better organization by, more picking the text. But it's just the mindset of a specialty fuel truck with the tanks, and yeah, maybe, should have had the foresight to see it, but it isn't going to be strategically moving fuel
around as you rapidly advance. And yes, later in the war, particularly Britain and America did adopt the jerry can system, did adopt moving fuel forward even better. You can look at Red Ball Express and several other things, and yeah, the Red Ball Express didn't quite deliver what it should, but was so much better than what the Germans would have been able to do. I know this is running a bit long, but bear with me here. So later nations did improve upon, and especially with American motorization, do even better than the Germans, but this was a very revolutionary thing. The combination of the can and the system for moving fuel. Yes, and I've seen them, the Germans did build dedicated fuel trucks. Often I've seen them used at like airports, for loading up fighters and other things, and I do believe they were also used with the Panzer Division. Dedicated fuel trucks are a very good idea, I'm not knocking them, but it's this additional system that they set up and trained for, and for the scale of operating on France, it worked wonderfully. It got the Panzers first to Calais, and then later charging down into France, and caused the collapse of France. It broke down on the vast plains of Russia. Not that it didn't work well, it just, the overall scale of the situation and the lack of good roads and the smaller amounts of German trucks in relation to the distance traveled. So it's not necessarily, do you have enough trucks to haul your fuel, it's do you have enough trucks for this distance, because at some point wherever your fuel dump is, you're going to be carrying trucks, or trucks are just going to be carrying fuel just for the fuel trucks, not for the end result. When you're just driving from here to here, you might be able to do that on one tank of fuel that's in the truck. You're going out longer and burning it through more rugged terrain, you're going to have to carry extra fuel, eventually, just for the truck. Eventually it's diminishing returns. And obviously they would set the fuel dumps up by the railheads and all that, but the scale was just overwhelming. So, going into a lot of detail, but I think it is something that is often overlooked with the study of war and the study in war games, and this is one reason as you can tell, I'm a long-term player of war games, and there are other war game computer companies out there that make war games, and very good ones too. But what Hearts of Iron is, and what Paradox is doing with it, and we're somewhat moving away from this tech idea, but as it currently is, but being able to have these techs to differentiate capabilities, whether it's these type of techs or going, it'll be a few days since, or probably a week or more since I posted up on there, but Podcat himself, the lead programmer for Hearts of Iron 4, used the term going full black ice, and it was to talk about the situation where like this happens and going off the screen. If you go full black ice with your units like this, and they're supposedly making a better interface that they might be able to scroll through this, but going full black ice, it still may not work well enough. So he's well aware of what black ice is. I don't know how well he knows 8 versus 7 versus whatever, but he knows going full black ice, and so he's coined the term. But to be able to do this and model this makes Hearts of Iron a very special war game indeed, in my opinion. However much we think it's broken, this one is, and what we don't like in 2, it really is a special thing overall. Okay, so yes, I guess I could do a choose not to, but to me it's silly not to do. This is just, it's permanent effect of put on there of a throughput for supply throughput of plus 5% for the jerry cans. Anyone should pay 2,000 supplies for that. That's a permanent effect. Okay, since I've gone on so long, I extended this episode. We're going to call it a end of an episode here. Thanks so much for viewing. Thanks so much for liking the videos. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate any feedback. Like I was talking earlier, the more feedback I can get from you, the better I know my audience. I thought something like the fuel cans. You may have watched it and heard me talk about it about the same level in last series, but it's something that's, I think, a fundamental thing. Other things I know I go on a bit about, but thanks a lot.